And Paul, I similarly to what you said, is I have been very influenced by Peter Ward. In fact, we quoted him in a 1998 book, which we had written from 95 to 98 for exactly the same reason. I think our understanding of evolutionary biology and extinctions is fundamental to understanding this current moment. So just thank you very much for that input as well, Paul. What I just talked about is we want to go from, in this forum, and it's just, early thoughts among ourselves. And I made a contribution yesterday that I think is just the cause to why he said I should sort of lay that out a little bit. But this idea of being in the choir and orienting our song, our music, to something outside of ourselves, to a world that is starting to come along, is interesting, right? So here we are, the 9 of us, conversing, talking about clarifying our thinking, challenging each other, trying to find the right kind of music, in a way, the right, and as you have seen, if you've read any of what I've written to this group, I find it to be about the narrative, that the story that we promote is what, just like Paul just described, opens minds. And so that's the task, is how do we connect to what's going on around us in a way where that story starts resonating at a level where it leads to action, right? So what I did in my little write-up is I made the point that there are very significant things happening now around us that have never happened before, right? When you hear the head of the Bank of England say, if firms that ignore the climate crisis are going bankrupt, that's important, right? There's a message there from a financial leader of significance that says it's bankruptcy that you buy yourself if you avoid this climate issue. When people like the president and CEO of Walmart says, as a society, we're at an inflection point, that the leader of a retail organization says, as a society, we're at an inflection point. If we don't act now, we may not have an opportunity to do so later. And then behind that puts a whole program in place. That's important. That allows us as a choir to assume that there's an audience out there that is being driven by these. Redwood City. And same with what we're seeing from Microsoft, the same stuff we're seeing from all kinds of places, politicians, etc. So the point that I'm seeing is, on the one hand, we have what Paul has laid out, this extraordinary moment of crisis, this potential extinction that we're well on the way of accomplishing, right? This humanity of ours. And at the same moment, we have this opening in the world out there that says we've got to make something big happen. We need massive innovation. We need to make shifts like we could not imagine. I mean, that's where I want to just shortly reference back to Lucas Joppa from Microsoft, who says, if we can't do this in the next 10 years, the devastating impact that we're going to get will become irreversible, right? The sense of crisis, the sense of emergency, the sense of irreversibility is now out there. And he says, simply put, that gives us just over two business cycles to transform every sector of the global economy, right? These are hugely important positions. So around that, I then laid out for you a little bit about what I think could be a programmatic approach to this, right? So that I went into some detail about, what are these companies all doing and how could we adapt, attach ourselves to some of these efforts, be it in Australia, be it in the US, be it wherever they are, and become connected to these calls, to these pledges that these companies are making, that have no idea how to go about it, that don't know quite how to engage their people. I did a project with Microsoft where I was invited to work with their account managers on the pledge that that Microsoft had made at the highest level, right? And sort of talking to these account managers about, given that pledge, what can you do with your customers, with your retail customers, your industrial customers? And it was an extraordinary meeting. They went, oh yeah, with that support, we can do stuff. I can approach, the equivalent to Safeway with a completely different orientation. That's cool stuff. And then they went back home and their management said, get back to business, get back to work, sell the software, sell whatever you need to do, stop this silly stuff, no matter what the leadership said, right? So there's work to be done. So then I laid out a few of the sort of things we could do, right? Everything from climate talks, which I put a few things in that I've been involved with and Lisa have been doing, to participating in creating these kind of networks, that the things that we're doing here now, to doing workshops that actually allow people at work, like that story I just told you about the Microsoft account managers, to help them actually translate these commitments, these pledges into actual strategy, into action, into new relationships with suppliers, with their supply chains, with customers, and also internally among themselves. And then, there was this other piece that I referenced where I did some work with hackathons that are about encouraging, like in this case, it was with something called Metal Sharks and a company called Oracle, that was calling on all these young people to do a hackathon about how to deal with ocean stuff, right? So we got involved in doing talks for them, and it was quite extraordinary. And then, deeper stuff. If we can, the last one where it says regenerative implementation services, that's the kind of stuff that Kurt and I did around other transformations, but how can we do longer term, multi-year kind of projects in companies the way we've done at the BBC or at other, at BP, to actually transform a company on the back end of the kind of large commitments they're making at the leadership level. So that's what I kind of laid out for you, to try to go from, talking about it, getting our voices clear, getting our message clear, getting our narrative clear, but then also, having people commit to actions that we can help support in ways that make a difference.